The mess hall fell silent as the alien limped through the doorway. Captain Park stood from her seat, hand instinctively moving to her sidearm. The visitor's exoskeleton bore the unmistakable scars of combat. Fracture lines sealed with metallic compounds, missing segments replaced with crude prosthetics. "I seek shelter for the night," the alien announced in halting standard. "I am Taijo, veteran of the 3rd Fleet, 7th Division." Lieutenant Kim leaned toward Captain Park. "We should alert command. No Rakari has been this far into our territory since the Earth campaigns," Taijo interjected, his compound eyes shifting color slightly. "Which is precisely why I thought your soldiers might be interested in my story." Captain Park hesitated only briefly before gesturing to an empty seat. "Join us, Taijo. We're always eager to learn from experienced warriors." The soldiers around the table shifted uneasily, creating space for the alien visitor. Taijo moved with careful precision, his damaged exoskeleton clicking softly as he settled onto the bench. His compound eyes scanned the faces of the humans, catching their wary glances, and whispered concerns. Private Minho, the youngest soldier at the table, stared openly at Taijo's battle-scarred form. The Rakari noticed and turned his gaze directly to the young man. "You have questions, young one." Minho flushed red, but didn't look away. "How did you survive? I mean, everyone knows what happened to the Rakari forces on Earth." A sound like grinding metal emerged from Taijo. What the humans eventually realized was laughter. What everyone knows and what actually happened are rarely the same thing. Captain Park signaled for a server droid to bring food for their unexpected guest. "Our outpost isn't accustomed to Rakari visitors. I hope our nutrition synthesizer can accommodate your needs." "I have adapted to many food sources over my long travels," Taijo said. "Another skill I learned on your homeworld." The room grew quieter at the mention of Earth. For these frontier soldiers, Earth was almost mythical, the cradle of humanity, site of the most decisive battle in recent galactic history, and a place few of them had ever visited. The server droid returned with a plate of protein cubes and mineral supplements. Taijo picked up one cube, examining it before consuming it with a strange twisting motion of his mandibles. "Better than the tree bark I ate for 20 days while hiding in your Amazon region," he commented. Sergeant Hana, the unit's tactical officer, couldn't contain her curiosity any longer. "The official records say no Rakari survived the Amazon campaign." Taijo's eyes shifted to a deeper blue. "Official records serve those who write them, Sergeant. Reality is messier." Captain Park leaned forward. "How did you end up so far from Rakari space, Taijo?" "The border is 4 systems away. I am on a pilgrimage," the alien said simply. "To Earth." Lieutenant Kim's eyes widened. "Earth doesn't allow Rakari visitors. Not after." "Times change," Taijo interrupted. "A new reconciliation program allows veterans from both sides to return to battle sites. For closure, for understanding." The alien raised one damaged limb, where a crude mechanical joint replaced what had once been natural. "I have carried pieces of your Earth with me for 60 years. Now I return to make peace with it." Private Minho pushed his own plate away, fully invested in the conversation. "What happened to you there?" "They don't teach us much about the Earth campaigns, just that we won." Taijo's mandibles clicked softly. "Your kind has a saying, history is written by the victors. But even victors sometimes misunderstand what truly happened." Captain Park signaled to the unit's bartender, who brought over a bottle of synthetic alcohol and glasses for everyone. "I think this calls for something stronger than water. If you're going to tell war stories, we should at least make it proper." Taijo accepted a glass, examining the clear liquid inside. "On my homeworld, we drink only to honor the fallen." "Then we have something in common," Captain Park replied, raising her glass. "To the fallen, on all sides." The soldiers raised their glasses, some more hesitantly than others. Taijo mimicked the gesture, then consumed the drink in one motion. His exoskeleton briefly changed hue, a physiological reaction to the alcohol. I was young when I joined the invasion force, he began. A newly molted warrior, barely through my final metamorphosis. We were told humans were primitive, dangerous, but technologically inferior. Easy prey. His eyes dimmed to an almost gray color. The High Command failed to understand that technology alone does not determine a species' deadliness. The soldiers leaned in, captivated despite their initial wariness. Even the kitchen staff had stopped their work to listen. Our landing craft set down in what you call Bolivia. Beautiful place. Mountains reaching into clouds. Forests teeming with life unlike anything on Rakari worlds. We established our forward base in a valley, surrounded by these giant trees with bark that changed color with the sunlight. Taijo paused, his compound eyes seemingly focused on something distant. We were so busy studying the plants, we missed the signs of human habitation. Not buildings or technology, just subtle marks. Paths worn through vegetation. Fish traps in streams. Hunting platforms hidden in the canopy. Captain Park refilled his glass. You were being watched. The entire time, Taijo confirmed. For 3 days, we built our base, set up perimeter defenses against large predators, analyzed soil samples, all while local human tribes observed our every move, communicating with your military using methods we couldn't detect. Lieutenant Kim frowned. What methods? Our historical archives say Earth forces had no advanced communication systems in remote areas. String and cans, Taijo said simply. What? Several soldiers asked simultaneously. Primitive sound conducting systems, metal containers connected by thin fibers, stretched through the canopy. No electronics, no signals to detect. When we finally intercepted one, our technology experts couldn't understand how something so simple could be effective. That was our first lesson about humans. You make deadly use of the simplest tools. Private Minho couldn't hide his pride. My grandfather fought in South America. He never talked about it, though. Many don't, Taijo said softly. The things that happened there. Some memories are best left undisturbed. Yet you're returning, Captain Park observed. Taijo's exoskeleton rattled slightly. A Rakari sigh. Some ghosts must be faced to be banished. He continued his story, describing how on the 4th day, as his unit prepared for their first patrol beyond the base perimeter, the attack came. Not with advanced weapons or overwhelming numbers, but with devastating precision. Your people triggered landslides from 3 mountain faces simultaneously. Trapped between walls of moving earth, half our force was buried in minutes. Those who escaped the slide faced something worse. Humans who knew exactly when and where we would run. The mess hall was completely silent now, every eye fixed on the alien veteran. I survived by pure chance. A falling tree protected me from the worst of the landslide. When I regained consciousness, I was alone, separated from my unit. Communication systems damage. Taijo's mandibles clicked in what the humans now recognized as thoughtful contemplation. That was when I met my first human face to face, not as enemies on a battlefield, but as 2 frightened beings in a forest that suddenly seemed too quiet. Captain Park checked the time. It's getting late, and I suspect your story is just beginning. We have empty quarters in the eastern wing. You're welcome to rest there and continue tomorrow, if you're willing. Taijo's eyes brightened slightly. Tomorrow, then. I will tell you about the human named Junseo, who taught me why Earth was never meant to fall to the Rakari hegemony. As the soldiers disbanded for the night, Captain Park remained at the table with their alien guest. One question, Taijo. Why tell us this story? Why now? The alien's damaged limb traced a pattern on the table. Because soon I will face the families of those who died fighting my kind. Before I do, I needed to remember what it was like. To be the enemy, to be defeated, and to be shown unexpected mercy. Captain Park nodded slowly. Rest well, then. I think we all have much to learn from your story. As Taijo left the mess hall, the soldiers watched him go with different eyes than when he'd arrived, no longer seeing just an alien enemy, but a fellow veteran carrying the weight of a war none of them had personally known, yet which had shaped all their lives. We were fools. Taejo clicked his mandibles as he recounted the initial landing. Our intelligence suggested humans were barely past primitive technology. We expected an easy conquest. Private Do-Yun passed the alien a container of water, fascination overcoming his initial fear. Our first deployment was near what you call the Andes. My unit commander, Sunwoo, ordered us to establish a forward base in a valley. Before our defenses were even operational, humans struck from multiple directions. Taejo's exoskeleton quivered slightly. They used the terrain in ways we couldn't comprehend. They adapted to our technology faster than we could counter their tactics. Half our landing force was eliminated in the first Earth rotation. Morning light filtered through the mess hall windows as soldiers gathered for breakfast. Word had spread overnight about their unusual visitor, and the room was more crowded than usual. Captain Park noticed several off-duty personnel had appeared, eager to hear the alien's tale. Taejo sat at the same table as the previous evening. His damaged exoskeleton gleamed faintly, evidence of careful maintenance performed during the night. The alien looked up as Captain Park approached. "Your soldiers have been most hospitable," Taejo said. "I am grateful." Captain Park nodded and took her seat. "They're curious. We study the Earth campaigns in training." But hearing from someone who was there, she left the thought unfinished. Private Do-Yun, assigned to attend to their guest, placed a fresh container of water before the Rekkari. "Is this enough? Our database doesn't specify how much fluid your species requires." "More than enough," Taejo responded. "On Earth, we often went days without proper hydration. Your world's water sources were not always compatible with our biology." As the room filled with soldiers, Captain Park gestured for Taejo to continue his story from the previous night. The alien's compound eyes swept across the eager faces before he began. "We were fools." Taejo clicked his mandibles. "Our intelligence suggested humans were barely past primitive technology. We expected an easy conquest." Do-Yun sat down nearby, fascination now completely overcoming his initial fear of the alien. "Our first deployment was near what you call the Andes. My unit commander, Sunwoo, ordered us to establish a forward base in a valley. Before our defenses were even operational, humans struck from multiple directions." Taejo's exoskeleton quivered slightly at the memory. "They used the terrain in ways we couldn't comprehend. They adapted to our technology faster than we could counter their tactics. Half our landing force was eliminated in the first Earth rotation." The mess hall was silent as the alien continued. "I remember the night before the attack. We were so confident. Our scanners detected no energy signatures, no metal concentrations, no signs of advanced weapons. Sunwoo told us we would face primitive projectiles and simple explosives at worst." Lieutenant Kim interrupted. "But Earth had advanced military technology by then. Pulse rifles, shield generators, orbital defenses." Taejo made that strange grinding sound again, his version of laughter. "Yes, in your cities and military bases, but not where we landed. Your leaders were clever. They let us touch down in regions that appeared undeveloped. We thought we were being strategic by avoiding your concentrated forces. You were being herded," Captain Park realized. "Like prey animals," Taejo confirmed. That night, Sunwoo ordered minimal perimeter security. "Why waste energy defending against spears and arrows?" He said. I was young and agreed with him. Only Rakto, our science officer, expressed concern that our scans showed no wildlife near our position. The alien's eyes dimmed slightly. "Animals flee before danger. We should have recognized the warning." Sergeant Hanna leaned forward. "What happened in the attack?" "The humans struck at dawn. Not with the primitive weapons we expected, but with the land itself." Taejo gestured with his damaged limb. "They had spent the night digging channels high above our position, diverting a mountain stream. As the sun rose, they released the water." The alien paused to drink, his mandibles working carefully with the container. "The flood was only the beginning. The water weakened the ground beneath our heavier equipment. As we scrambled to save our communications array, the first human fighters appeared on the ridges. They wore camouflage that matched the rocks and plants so perfectly our targeting systems struggled to lock on. Private Doyen's eyes were wide. But how could they fight against your superior weapons? They didn't fight our weapons, Taejo explained. They fought us. The warriors who appeared were a distraction. They fired simple projectiles, metal fragments propelled by chemical explosions, not to kill but to keep our attention on the ridges. The aliens' mandibles clicked rapidly. The real attack came from below. Humans had tunneled under our position during the night. They emerged inside our perimeter, targeting our power generators and command structure. Several soldiers exchanged impressed glances. I was at a forward scanner post when the attack began. I saw Sun Wu die first, a single projectile through his primary breathing slit. Our second-in-command, Danby, ordered a defensive formation, but we were already surrounded. The humans had placed fighters in the trees above us, in the rocks around us, and now from the ground beneath us. Taejo's exoskeleton rattled, that same sighing sound. 12 minutes. That's how long the attack lasted. 12 minutes to destroy a Rakari forward unit of 63 warriors with advanced combat training. Captain Park's expression remained neutral, but her posture had straightened with unmistakable pride. "How did you survive?" asked a technician from the back of the room. "The flood that began the attack carried me downstream. My exoskeleton was damaged, but its emergency protocols activated, hardening to protect my vital organs. I was unconscious, presumed dead." Taejo touched one of the metallic seams on his chest plate. "I woke half buried in mud, 3 kilometers from our landing site." The alien continued, describing how he had pulled himself from the mud and hidden in a crevice as human search parties combed the area. They were thorough, methodical, nothing like the primitive savages our commanders had described. They collected their dead with respect and gathered our technology with careful precision. Lieutenant Kim frowned, but Rakari technology self-destructs when captured. "That's standard procedure." "It should have," Taejo agreed, but the humans had developed countermeasures. They used simple methods, submerging components in water, packing certain parts in native clay that blocked our self-destruct signals. Within hours, I watched them disassemble a Rakari pulse rifle and adapt its power source to their own devices. He looked around the room. "Do you understand what that means?" Technology we had spent decades developing was reverse-engineered by humans in a matter of hours in a muddy field with primitive tools. The soldiers shifted uncomfortably, both proud and unsettled by this revelation. For 3 days, I hid in that crevice, watching the humans work. They established a temporary camp where our base had been. They brought in specialists, scientists in simple clothing who examined everything we had left behind. I saw them testing our communication frequencies, analyzing our water and food supplies, learning everything about us. Taejo paused again, his compound eyes shifting to a deep blue. "On the 4th day, a human child found me." The mess hall grew even quieter. A small female, no more than 10 Earth years. She was collecting plants near my hiding place. She saw my eyes reflecting light from the crevice. Instead of running in fear or calling for warriors, she simply sat and stared at me. The alien's voice grew softer. She returned with food, left it outside my hiding place. Not human food, plants and insects similar to those in my ration packs. She had studied our food supplies and determined what I might be able to eat. Captain Park raised an eyebrow. "A child figured that out. Children often see what adults miss," Taejo replied. "Adults look for threats. Children look for understanding." He continued his story, explaining how the child visited daily, gradually coaxing him from hiding. She drew pictures in the dirt to communicate. Crude symbols, but effective. She wanted to know if I was injured, if I needed medicine. I should have been terrified, should have maintained communication silence as our protocols demanded. But I was young, injured, and alone on an alien world. Taejo's exoskeleton briefly changed color, flushing a deeper green. On the 7th day, she brought an adult male. I prepared to fight, certain this was the end. Instead, the man simply said, "We can help you," in crude but understandable Rakari language. Private Doyen nearly dropped his water container. "They learned your language in a week." Not fully, but enough basic terms from our communication devices. Enough to begin. Taejo's mandibles clicked softly. That was when I first understood we had truly lost. Not just a battle, but the war. Any species that could adapt so quickly, that could turn children into diplomatic bridges rather than frightened victims, such a species could never be conquered. The alien rose slowly from his seat. "I must rest now. Tomorrow, I will tell you about my time in the human camp, where I learned why the Rakari High Command had fundamentally misunderstood what makes humans the most dangerous species in the known galaxy." As Taejo limped from the mess hall, the soldiers remained seated, processing his story. Captain Park finally broke the silence. "History tells us we won the Earth campaigns through superior strategy and home field advantage. It seems there was more to it than that." Sergeant Hannah nodded. "If his story is true, we didn't just defend our planet. We'd revealed something about ourselves that changed how this alien saw his own people." The question, Lieutenant Kim added quietly, is whether that revelation brought him here as a pilgrim seeking understanding, or something else entirely. Captain Park watched the doorway where Taejo had disappeared. "We'll find out tomorrow. For now, double the security detail, but maintain all courtesies. Our guest deserves our respect, whether former enemy or not." The soldiers dispersed, each carrying pieces of a story that had suddenly made the legendary Earth campaigns feel immediate and personal in ways their training manuals never had. The assault on Fortress Hyunwoo was meant to break human resistance in the northern continent, Taejo continued. But your weather had other plans. He described how a sudden blizzard had separated him from his unit. Blinded by snow and wounded by human projectiles, he had collapsed in a frozen ravine. I expected death. Instead, I woke to find a human medic, Jiho, I later learned, treating my wounds. When I asked why, he simply said, "Because you're alive." Captain Park exchanged glances with her officers. This contradicted everything in their historical records about the brutal Earth campaigns. "That moment changed everything I understood about humans," Taejo said quietly. The third day of Taejo's stay at the outpost brought stormy weather. Rain lashed against the windows of the mess hall as soldiers gathered, eager to hear the next chapter of the alien story. The room was even more crowded than before, with personnel from other sectors requesting permission to attend. Taejo sat at what had become his usual place, his scared exoskeleton gleaming dully in the artificial light. Captain Park noticed he moved more stiffly today, the old wounds perhaps troubling him as the weather changed. "Are you well enough to continue?" she asked as she took her seat. "Weather affects old injuries," Taejo confirmed. "It reminds me of that day in the northern lands of Earth." Private Doyen set a warm drink before the alien, a special blend the kitchen staff had created based on the nutritional information they'd gathered. Taejo's mandibles clicked in appreciation as he sampled it. After my encounter with the child and the human scientist, he began, picking up his story from the previous day. "I was taken to a larger human camp. They treated me not as a prisoner, but as a guest of sorts. Always guarded, but never mistreated." His compound eyes shifted to a deeper blue color. "For 2 Earth months, I learned their ways while they learned about the Rakari. They allowed me limited movement within their camp. I observed their social structures, their military protocols, their relationship with their planet." "Did you provide intelligence to them?" Lieutenant Kim asked directly. "Some," Taejo admitted. "Not military secrets. I was a low-ranking warrior. I knew little of value. But I explained our biology, our basic needs. In exchange, they taught me more of their language, showed me how they lived." He took another sip of the warm drink. "When they determined I was trustworthy enough, they allowed me to join a supply transport to another base. That was how I came to be part of the Northern Campaign, though not as a combatant." The alien's exoskeleton rattled slightly, that sighing sound the soldiers now recognized. By then, the war had escalated. The Rakari High Command, enraged by the initial defeats, had committed greater forces. 3 full battle fleets descended on Earth. Surgeon Hanna leaned forward. Our historical records say the Northern Hemisphere campaign was the bloodiest of the war. For both sides, Taejo confirmed. The humans had established what they called Fortress Hyunwoo in a mountain region. Not an actual fortress as Rakari would build, but a network of interconnected bunkers, tunnels, and defensive positions spread across 50 kilometers. He described how the human commanders had welcomed his insight into Rakari tactics, using his knowledge to strengthen their defenses. I was not a traitor, Taejo said firmly, noticing the expressions of some younger soldiers. I was a prisoner who chose to help those who had shown me compassion. There is a difference. Captain Park nodded in understanding. Continue, please. The assault on Fortress Hyunwoo was meant to break human resistance in the northern continent. Taejo continued. But your weather had other plans. His compound eyes seemed to focus on something distant, beyond the walls of the mess hall. The Rakari attack force was massive. Over 20,000 warriors supported by air and ground units. The humans had perhaps 2,000 defenders. The battle should have ended quickly. Taejo described how the Rakari forces approached from 3 directions, using terrain mapping technology to plot their advance. Their strategy was sound, their numbers overwhelming. But they failed to account for Earth's unpredictable weather patterns. 2 days before the planned assault, temperature readings dropped dramatically. The human defenders knew what this meant. The Rakari commanders did not. Lightning flashed outside the mess hall windows, as if emphasizing his point. Several soldiers jumped slightly at the timing. The blizzard struck without warning, Taejo said. Our species evolved on a world without snow. We had environmental suits, yes, but they were designed for brief exposure, not for what Earth delivered. He described swirling white darkness, winds that cut through Rakari protective gear, temperatures that caused their exoskeletons to contract painfully. I was part of a forward observation team. We were positioned on a ridge overlooking the human fortifications when the storm hit. Our communications failed. Our vision systems could not penetrate the snow. We were effectively blind. The alien's damaged limb twitched slightly. The humans counterattacked during the storm's peak. They wore white coverings, moved on devices that glided over the snow, carried weapons modified to function in extreme cold. They struck like ghosts, appearing from the whiteness, attacking, then vanishing again. Taejo described the chaos of the battle. Rakari warriors unable to coordinate, their technology failing, their bodies struggling against conditions they had never evolved to withstand. I was separated from my team when a human explosive collapsed the snow ridge where we were positioned. The avalanche carried me down into a ravine. My exoskeleton was punctured by ice and rocks. I lost consciousness briefly. His voice grew softer. When I awoke, I was partially buried in snow. My thermal regulators had failed. I was bleeding internal fluids. The pain. He paused. Rakari do not fear death in battle. It is expected. As I lay there, I prepared myself for the final journey. The mess hall was completely silent now. Even the kitchen staff had paused their work to listen. Then I heard crunching sounds. Human footsteps in snow. I prepared for a killing blow. Perhaps a mercy kill from a human soldier. It would have been acceptable. Taejo's mandibles clicked slowly. Instead, I felt hands digging through the snow around me, exposing my damaged body. The alien described how a human in white cold-weather gear knelt beside him. Not pointing a weapon, but carrying a medical kit. The human spoke words Taejo couldn't understand, then began applying emergency treatment to his worst injuries. I tried to move away. I thought perhaps this was some new torture, to save me only to extract information. The human restrained me gently, speaking in a calm voice. Taejo's eyes shifted to a lighter blue. When my translator finally processed his words, he was saying, Be still. You'll make the bleeding worse. The alien looked directly at Captain Park. I asked him why he was helping an enemy. Why not let me die or finish me quickly? He looked surprised by the question. He said simply, "Because you are alive." Captain Park exchanged glances with her officers. This contradicted everything in their historical records about the brutal Earth campaigns. That moment changed everything they understood about humans, Taejo said quietly. He explained how the human medic, Jiho, had stabilized his wounds, then called for assistance. Instead of being executed or left to die, Taejo was evacuated to a human medical facility behind their lines. I learned later that Jiho had violated direct orders by treating me. His commanding officer had instructed all medics to prioritize human wounded only. But Jiho belonged to something called the International Medical Corps. He told me they followed an ancient oath to treat all injured, regardless of which side they fought for. Private Doyun seemed puzzled. But why would humans waste resources on enemy wounded? Especially in a battle they were struggling to win. That, Taejo said, was the question that consumed me during my recovery. It made no tactical sense. It offered no strategic advantage. By Rakari standards, it was foolish. The alien's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Yet as I observed more humans, I saw this behavior was not unique to Jiho. Many of them held principles that transcended immediate tactical advantage. They followed codes of conduct even when it was difficult or dangerous to do so. Taejo described his 3 weeks in the human medical facility, how he watched human doctors work tirelessly to save lives, both their own people and the handful of Rakari prisoners, how they shared limited medical supplies equally among all patients, how they maintained their commitment to healing even as the battle raged nearby. One night, a human nurse found me attempting to access a communication terminal. By your military law, I should have been executed as a spy. Instead, she simply disconnected the terminal and said, "If you have questions, just ask directly." His compound eyes brightened slightly. So I did. I asked why they fought so fiercely yet treated enemies with such care. The answer I received has stayed with me for 60 years. Captain Park leaned forward. What did they tell you? The nurse called for Jiho, the medic who had saved me. He sat beside my recovery pod and said, "We fight to protect our home and our people, but how we fight defines who we are. If we abandon our principles to win, then we've already lost something more important than the war." Taejo's exoskeleton briefly changed color, flushing a deeper green in what the humans now recognize as emotional response. "No Rakari would think this way," he continued. "For us, victory is the only principle that matters. The strong survive. The weak perish. It is natural law." The alien looked around at the human faces watching him. But humans defy natural law. You protect your weak. You heal your enemies. You hold to principles even when they disadvantage you. It makes no sense by Rakari standards. His damaged limb traced a pattern on the table. Yet you defeated us. The supposedly weaker, more foolish species won against superior technology and numbers. The room fell silent as the soldiers considered his words. Finally, Captain Park spoke. "What happened after your recovery?" Taejo's mandibles clicked softly. "That is perhaps the most important part of my story. But the hour grows late, and this old warrior needs rest." As he rose to leave, Lieutenant Kim couldn't contain her question. Was it true compassion, or just a strategy to extract information from you? Taejo paused at the doorway. I asked Jiho the same question before I left Earth. His answer will be part of tomorrow's tale. As the alien departed, the soldiers remained, discussing what they had heard. Captain Park noticed the conversation had shifted, from viewing Taejo as a curiosity to considering the deeper implications of his story. "If what he says is true," Surgeon Hannah said quietly, "then we won the Earth campaigns not just because of our weapons or tactics, but because of who we were as a species." Captain Park nodded slowly. "And perhaps who we still are." She looked toward the doorway where Taejo had disappeared. or who we should strive to be. In the human compound, I witnessed behaviors our commanders had assured us were impossible, Taejo explained. Their leader, Commander Jinwoo, questioned me not about our weapons or tactics, but about why we had come to Earth. The alien described watching humans care for each other, share limited resources, and maintain hope despite overwhelming odds. During a massive assault on the compound, Commander Jinwoo ordered an evacuation. In the chaos, I had a clear opportunity to escape and rejoin Rakari forces. Taejo paused, but I didn't. Lieutenant Kim leaned forward. Why not? Taejo's eyes dimmed. Because I had seen enough to know we were wrong about humans. The fourth day of Taejo's visit brought clear skies and renewed interest. Word had spread beyond the outpost, and Captain Park had received several messages from command headquarters requesting updates on their unusual guest. She had responded with minimal details, wanting to hear the alien's complete story before filing an official report. The mess hall was packed by mid-morning. Soldiers stood against walls and sat on the floor, unwilling to miss what had become the most discussed event at the outpost in years. Taejo entered the room slowly, his damaged exoskeleton moving more smoothly than previous days. Private Do-yeon had helped him perform maintenance on his prosthetics overnight, an act of assistance that seemed to surprise the alien. Your kindness reminds me of my time at the Earth facility, Taejo remarked as he took his seat. Unexpected, but welcome. Captain Park nodded to the kitchen staff, who brought the special nutrient drink they had prepared for their guest. We're eager to hear what happened after your recovery in the medical facility. Taejo's compound eyes scanned the crowded room before he continued his story. After 3 weeks of treatment, my wounds had healed enough for transfer. The battle for the northern territories was still raging. The Rakari forces had regrouped after the blizzard disaster, but were making little progress against human defenses. The alien described how he was moved to a different facility, a prisoner compound farther from the front lines. Unlike the medical center, this place housed several dozen Rakari captives. It was nothing like what we had been told to expect if captured, Taejo said. Our commanders warned us that humans tortured prisoners, performed experiments on them, executed them when they were no longer useful. The High Command had issued each warrior suicide capsules to use if capture seemed inevitable. Private Do-yeon looked shocked. That's what you believed about us. It's what we were told, Taejo corrected. The High Command needed us to fear humans enough to fight without question. Fear is a powerful motivator. He described his arrival at the compound, a collection of simple buildings surrounded by a perimeter fence and guard towers. The Rakari prisoners were housed in structures adapted to their biological needs, with temperature and humidity controls that mimicked their homeworld. In the human compound, I witnessed behaviors our commanders had assured us were impossible, Taejo explained. Their leader, Commander Jinwoo, questioned me not about our weapons or tactics, but about why we had come to Earth. Taejo's mandibles clicked slowly as he recalled the human commander, a tall, stern-faced man with gray-streaked hair and watchful eyes. Jinwoo was unlike other human leaders I had observed. He spoke our language with remarkable skill. He knew our customs, our hierarchies, even some of our historical conflicts. When I asked how he had learned these things, he told me he had been a cultural anthropologist before the war. The alien described his first formal interrogation. Instead of demands for military information, Commander Jinwoo had asked about Rakari philosophy, their views on territorial expansion, their justifications for war. He wanted to understand us, Taejo said, his voice carrying a note of lingering surprise. Not just to defeat us, but to comprehend why we fought. Lieutenant Kim frowned. That seems inefficient during wartime. Precisely what I thought, Taejo agreed. I believed it was an elaborate deception, a method to make me lower my guard before extracting useful intelligence. The alien described how he had resisted, providing only basic information required by interplanetary protocols. Yet Commander Jinwoo persisted with his unusual approach. After several days, he invited me to tour the compound. With guards, of course, but with remarkable freedom of movement. He wanted me to see how they operated. Taijo described walking through the facility, observing human activities. He saw prisoners receiving medical care, nutritional needs being met, even recreational periods where captured Rakari could exercise. Most surprising was how the humans treated each other, he continued. Their resources were limited. Supply lines were frequently disrupted by Rakari attacks. Yet they shared everything equally. Soldiers, support staff, and prisoners all received the same rations. The alien's eyes shifted to a deeper blue. One day, a human child entered the compound, a daughter of one of the communication specialists. She had brought drawings for her parent. She saw me watching and approached, despite the guard's concerns. Taijo described how the child had shown him her artwork, crude images of the sky, mountains, and what appeared to be humans and Rakari standing together. She asked me if I had children. When I explained our reproductive differences, that Rakari do not raise young as humans do, she seemed confused. She asked, "Then who teaches you things?" I had no answer that made sense to a human child. Captain Park noticed the alien's mandibles trembling slightly, an emotional response they hadn't seen before. Later that day, I asked Commander Jinwoo why civilians, especially children, were present in a military facility during wartime. He explained that some staff had refused evacuation, preferring to keep families together despite the danger. Humans fight better when defending what they love, he said. The alien described watching humans care for each other, share limited resources, and maintain hope despite overwhelming odds. They held celebrations despite food shortages. They created art despite approaching danger. They taught their children despite uncertainty about tomorrow. None of this matched what we had been told about humans. Taijo paused to drink from the container before him. The room remained silent, captivated by his account. As weeks passed, I began to assist in the medical center, applying knowledge I had gained while recovering. The human doctors accepted my help with minimal suspicion, another inexplicable behavior by enemy standards. He described learning more about Earth's cultures through these interactions, discovering the diversity of human beliefs, social systems, and values. Then came the day that changed everything, Taijo said. Rakari forces launched a massive assault on the compound. Not a strategic target, but they had learned of the prisoners held there. The High Command could not allow captured warriors to potentially share information. The alien's exoskeleton rattled slightly. The attack began at dawn. Aerial bombardment first, then ground forces. The human defenses were substantial but insufficient against such an onslaught. Taijo described the chaos. Buildings collapsing, humans rushing to defensive positions, prisoners being moved to secure areas. Commander Jinwoo ordered an evacuation. All personnel, all prisoners, all civilians. No one was to be left behind. I watched human soldiers risk their lives to rescue both their own wounded and injured Rakari prisoners. His compound eyes dimmed. During the confusion, I found myself near a damaged section of the perimeter fence. A stray explosive had created an opening. Beyond it, I could see advancing Rakari forces. My opportunity for escape was clear. Lieutenant Kim leaned forward. "Why not take it? You could have rejoined your people." Taijo's eyes dimmed further, because I had seen enough to know we were wrong about humans. The alien's damaged limb traced a pattern on the table. I had witnessed something our species had never considered possible: strength through compassion. The humans' apparent weakness, their concern for others, their willingness to sacrifice for principles, had revealed itself as their greatest power. Taijo described his decision to help evacuate the medical center instead of escaping. Working alongside human doctors, he had helped move injured prisoners to transport vehicles. One of our wounded warriors recognized me. He called me traitor in our language. I told him I was not betraying our people. I was learning truths the High Command had hidden from us. The alien fell silent for a moment, his exoskeleton changing color slightly. "What happened then?" Private Doyan asked quietly. Commander Jinwoo found me helping with the evacuation. He had a vehicle ready. the last to leave the compound. He said, "You can go to your people if you wish. We won't stop you." Another inexplicable human decision, offering choice when force would have been simpler. Taejo's mandibles clicked softly. I asked why he would let me go after all I had learned about their operations. His answer was perhaps the most important lesson I received on Earth. The alien looked directly at Captain Park. He said, "Because forcing you to stay would prove everything your leaders told you about humans was right. Letting you choose proves everything they told you was wrong." The mess hall remained silent as the soldiers absorbed this statement. "I chose to board the evacuation vehicle," Taejo continued. "As we departed, I watched Rakari forces overrun the compound. They would find no humans to capture, no intelligence to gather. Just empty buildings and the realization that their prisoners had been treated better than they had been told." Lieutenant Kim's expression remained skeptical. "This Commander Jinwoo sounds too idealistic to be an effective military leader." "I thought the same," Taejo admitted, "until I learned that his approach had led to 17 Rakari defections in the previous year alone. Warriors who, like me, discovered the enemy was not as described. Each defector provided intelligence far more valuable than what could be extracted through traditional methods." The alien's damaged limb moved slightly. Strategic compassion, perhaps, but genuine nonetheless. Captain Park checked the time. "I believe we should break for the midday meal. Taejo, would you join my officers and me in the command dining room? I have some questions about this Commander Jinwoo." As the crowd dispersed, soldiers continued discussing the alien's story in hushed tones. Private Doyeon remained behind, helping Taejo rise from his seat. "Is it true?" the young soldier asked quietly. "Did humans really treat enemy prisoners that way during a war for survival?" Taejo's compound eyes focused on Doyeon. "Not all humans. Not in all places. War reveals both the best and worst in all species. But what I witnessed was enough to change my understanding of what strength truly means." The alien placed his damaged limb briefly on the young soldier's shoulder. "Tomorrow I will tell you the final chapter, how that understanding shaped 60 years of my life after Earth, and why I now return to a planet that was once my enemy's home." As they walked from the mess hall, several soldiers nodded respectfully to the alien visitor, no longer seeing an enemy, but a being whose journey had somehow become important to their own understanding of their species' history. "I chose to help the humans escape the compound," Taejo concluded. "It was considered treason by the hegemony, but by then, the war was already shifting. Earth's resistance forced our eventual withdrawal." He produced a small object from a compartment in his exoskeleton, a tarnished metal disc on a chain. "Medic Jiho gave me this before we parted. He called it a good luck charm. I've carried it for 60 cycles." Captain Park nodded slowly. "Earth is now the central diplomatic hub for 17 species. The Earth campaigns are taught in our military academies as the turning point in galactic history." Taejo rose to leave. "I journey to Earth as part of the reconciliation program. Perhaps I will find Jiho's descendants." As the alien departed, Private Doyeon turned to his captain. "Is it true? Did we really defeat a technologically superior force?" Captain Park watched Taejo's retreating form. "The deadliest thing about Earth was never its environment or weapons," she said quietly. "It was our unbreakable spirit when defending our home." The final day of Taejo's visit brought a sense of anticipation to the outpost. The alien's story had transformed from a curiosity into something meaningful for the soldiers who had listened. Many had sent messages to family members, sharing pieces of what they had learned. Some had begun searching historical archives for records of the northern campaigns and names like Commander Jinwoo and Medic Jiho. The mess hall was filled beyond capacity. Captain Park had authorized a station-wide broadcast, so personnel who couldn't fit in the room could still hear the conclusion of Taejo's tale. The alien entered with Private Doyeon at his side. Taejo moved with more confidence today, his damaged exoskeleton functioning better after Doyeon and the station's technical team had helped him with repairs. Several soldiers nodded respectfully as he passed, a striking contrast to the wariness that had greeted his arrival. "You have been most generous with your time and resources," Taejo said as he took his seat beside Captain Park. "Few outposts would offer such hospitality to a former enemy." "Perhaps we learned something from Commander Jinwoo's example," Captain Park replied. "You were telling us about your decision during the compound evacuation." Taejo's compound eyes brightened slightly as he picked up his story. The human evacuation convoy traveled through the night, avoiding main routes where Rakari forces were advancing. By dawn, we had reached another human facility, a larger military base built into a mountain. The alien described the underground complex, a maze of tunnels, barracks, command centers, and supply depots. The evacuees from the compound were processed efficiently, with wounded taken to medical facilities and others assigned temporary quarters. "No one questioned my presence," Taejo said. "A Rakari moving freely among humans would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. But Commander Jinwoo's authority was respected, and his decision to bring me was not challenged." His mandibles clicked softly. That day, Jinwoo brought me to a secure meeting room. Inside were human military leaders, not local commanders, but representatives from different Earth regions. They were discussing the war's progress. Taejo described watching these leaders debate strategy, share intelligence, and analyze Rakari weaknesses. I was shocked they allowed me to observe such discussions. When I asked Jinwoo why, he explained that their openness served a purpose. "We want you to see that humanity is united in this fight, despite our different cultures and governments." The alien's damaged limb traced a pattern on the table. He was right. The human leaders argued about methods, but their commitment to Earth's defense never wavered. They showed a unity my own species struggled to maintain even with our hierarchical structure. Lieutenant Kim frowned. "They allowed an enemy combatant to hear strategic planning. That seems reckless." "It was calculated," Taejo replied. "They shared enough to demonstrate their resolve without revealing critical details, and they gained something more valuable: my complete reassessment of human capabilities." He described how, in the following days, he was asked to provide insights on Rakari tactics and vulnerabilities. Initially reluctant, he eventually began sharing information. "I chose to help the humans," Taejo said. "Not with classified technology or immediate battle plans. I could not betray my own people so directly. But I explained our cultural assumptions, our tactical preferences, our biological limitations, information that would help humans understand their enemy." His exoskeleton rattled slightly, that sighing sound the soldiers now recognized. It was considered treason by the hegemony, but by then, the war was already shifting. Earth's resistance had proven far more effective than anyone predicted. Taejo described the weeks that followed. He worked with human intelligence officers, helped treat injured Rakari prisoners, and gradually gained trust among the base personnel. Medic Jiho was stationed at the mountain facility as well. He continued to check my health regularly, ensuring my injuries had properly healed. We developed what humans might call a friendship, something Rakari rarely form outside their birth clusters. The alien's eyes shifted to a warmer blue color. One day, Jiho invited me to walk with him to a viewing platform near the mountain's peak. It offered a panoramic view of Earth's landscape: forests, mountains, a distant lake reflecting sunlight. It was breathtaking. Taejo paused, seeming lost in the memory. Jiho told me he had grown up in that region, that his ancestors had lived there for thousands of years, that every tree, every stone, every stream held meaning for his people. The mess hall was completely silent as the alien continued. He asked me about Rakari, about our homeworld, about what drove us to expand across the stars. I explained our biological imperatives, our resource needs, our hierarchical society that demanded continuous conquest. Taejo's mandibles clicked slowly. Jiho listened without judgment. Then he said something I have never forgotten. "The difference between us isn't technology or biology. It's that you fight to conquer, but we fight to protect. That's why you can't win here. The alien reached into a compartment in his exoskeleton and carefully removed something. He placed it on the table, a tarnished metal disc on a simple chain. The soldiers leaned forward to see. Medic Jiho gave me this before we parted. He called it a good luck charm. I've carried it for 60 cycles. Captain Park carefully picked up the disc. One side bore the faded image of a serpent-like creature wrapped around a staff. The other had words in an old Earth language. It's a medical symbol, she said. Ancient Earth physicians wore these. Yes, Taejo confirmed. Jiho explained it represented healing and knowledge. He said that perhaps someday our species would meet as healers rather than warriors. The alien reclaimed the charm, carefully returning it to its compartment. 2 weeks after that conversation, news reached the mountain facility. The Rakari High Command had ordered a strategic withdrawal from Earth. Our forces were retreating. Taejo described the reactions among the humans, not wild celebration, but quiet relief mixed with wariness. Commander Jinwoo explained that the hegemony had underestimated the cost of conquering Earth. Our losses had been tremendous. Other species under Rakari control had begun resistance movements, inspired by human success. The High Command decided Earth was not worth the resources required to subdue it. The alien's compound eyes surveyed the room. The truth, which took years for our leadership to acknowledge, was simpler. We had lost, not just battles, but the war itself. A technologically superior invading force had been defeated by a species protecting its homeworld. Lieutenant Kim broke the silence. What happened to you after the withdrawal? I faced a choice, Taejo said. Return to Rakari space as a failure, possibly facing execution for assisting humans, or accept an offer from Commander Jinwoo. Political asylum on a neutral planet, where I could serve as a cultural intermediary between our species. His mandibles clicked softly. I chose the latter path. For 60 cycles, I have lived on the border worlds, working to build understanding between humans and Rakari. It has been a solitary existence, distrusted by my own kind, viewed with suspicion by many humans. Captain Park's expression softened. Yet you continued this work for decades. Why? Because I saw the alternative, Taejo said simply. Continued conflict between our species would bring only destruction. What I learned on Earth needed to be shared, even if few wished to hear it. The alien's exoskeleton briefly changed color. 10 cycles ago, something remarkable happened. A human-led diplomatic initiative established formal relations with the Rakari hegemony. Not submission, not dominance, but mutual recognition. Taejo described how this diplomatic breakthrough had led to cultural exchanges, trade agreements, and eventually a reconciliation program for veterans of the Earth campaigns. After 60 cycles, I received permission to return to Earth, he said, not as an invader or prisoner, but as a participant in healing old wounds. He produced a small holographic projector from another compartment. When activated, it displayed an official document with both human and Rakari symbols. 500 veterans from both sides will meet on Earth next month. We will visit battle sites, share stories, acknowledge losses, and perhaps find some measure of peace. Captain Park nodded slowly. Earth is now the central diplomatic hub for 17 species. The Earth campaigns are taught in our military academies as the turning point in galactic history. As they should be, Taejo agreed. Not just for the victory, but for what that victory revealed about humanity's potential. The alien carefully stored the holographic projector and rose from his seat. My transport leaves in 1 hour. I thank you for your hospitality and for listening to an old warrior's memories. Will you find him? Private Dohyun asked suddenly. Medic Jiho. He would be very old now, if still alive. Taejo said. But I journey to Earth as part of the reconciliation program. Perhaps I will find Jiho's descendants. Captain Park stood and extended her hand in the human gesture of farewell. After a moment's hesitation, Taejo grasped it with his undamaged limb. Safe travels, she said. And thank you for sharing your perspective on our shared history. As the alien departed, escorted by Private Do-Yun to the docking bay, the soldiers remained in the mess hall, discussing what they had heard. Many seemed moved by Taejo's account, seeing their own military service in a different light. Private Do-Yun returned some time later, after Taejo's ship had departed. He approached Captain Park with a questioning expression. Is it true? Did we really defeat a technologically superior force? Captain Park watched the viewport where Taejo's ship had disappeared into space. The deadliest thing about Earth was never its environment or weapons, she said quietly. It was our unbreakable spirit when defending our home. She turned to face her gathered soldiers. Remember Taejo's story when you feel your duties here are unimportant. What we defend is not just territory or resources, but a way of existing in this galaxy that values life, even the lives of those who once sought to conquer us. As the soldiers dispersed to their duties, many carried a new sense of purpose. The alien's tale had transformed from an entertaining diversion to a profound reminder of what their uniform represented, not just military power, but the potential for something greater. In the command center, Captain Park began composing her official report about their unusual visitor. She paused, looking at the final line she had written. Perhaps the most valuable defense technology humanity has ever developed is not our weapons or shields, but our capacity to turn enemies into allies through unexpected compassion. She nodded to herself and transmitted the report. In a galaxy filled with potential conflicts, it seemed like a lesson worth preserving.